Good, thank you.
Yeah.
All right. I can go ahead and share my screen, and then I will do just a little bit of framing up so you know where we're going today before we dive all the way in. It's a little bit smaller. Okay, for anyone who's joining today, who wasn't here for either of the last two sessions, this is the third of three workshops on our calendars, and specifically, even more so on event registration, which is the module that allows you to have folks sign up for the events that you have in Veracross. And these sessions are designed to be, pretty straightforward, step by step, that type of thing, and make it possible for you to learn about how to first, put in events and set up events in Veracross to begin with. And then we started on this past Tuesday talking through the steps to set up an event registration workflow. And then today we're going to be following on that event registration workflow, talking about some of the more advanced features that you have access to and might want to use. And you do have a case in the system. Your school should have a case if you signed up for this implementation cohort that allows you to ask school specific questions when we're not on the phone. And I will keep those open for a few weeks before closing everything out, just in case additional questions come to mind as you're building your first event registration workflows. So, like Tuesday, I'm going to give us a little bit of a preview because we're going to be working with a different scenario. And then I'm going to be covering a set of important features that I want you to know about and that will hopefully be helpful to you as you get to know this system and this feature. So today we're going to be talking about a few different things, including a golf tournament here. Um, this is different from the musical we were looking at, and you can see in this particular case we have a golf. We have different types of events. We have a case for ticket sales. It looks like we'll have to look at that. It looks like we have a golf tournament that is really just generally, are you going to be part of it? It's going to be $100. Are you going to be a part of this? As I go through here, I'm going to go on to the next one. I'm going to register as a guest. I'm just going to call out a few things because then we're going to step back into the system and I'm going to show you how you use those features, how you set them up when you want to use them. So I'm just going to put in a test here. We are going to look in more depth on how to set up a questionnaire. How do you collect details and data as part of your event registration? And you can see here these are fairly common examples of asking, do you want to volunteer as part of this event? Do you have any food allergies that you want to let us know about if there's a meal, that type of thing. So we're gonna look at this together and see how you set these up. If I continue on, we are also going to show how do you set up the ability to donate. How do you set up the ability to donate? That's either 0 or 1,500, I guess. But I will actually show you how to do a couple different ways that you can encourage folks to donate. And if you use Veracross Development, not only does it capture this, but it actually directly integrates with the development system and can put in that donation there. So wanted to call out a few of those. There are some other things that are not showing up here yet, and that's because we will build them together and we'll get to see how some of those features work. But now that we've gone through, we're going to go back to the beginning. Now that we've gone through, we're going to go back into Axiom. And let's remember where we start. So if you are working with calendar events or event registration, you do that from the calendar's homepage, And if you remember last time, we're actually not going to start from scratch this time like we did on Tuesday. There is a video that will be posted if it hasn't been already in the course where you got to these and you can go back and watch. But just the quick reminder is if you're starting from scratch and you want to create a new event registration form, you hover over Add and you click on the published forms. But for those that you've already created or are in the process of drafting before you start to use them, those are actually down here in the lower left section under event registration. And you can see, you can look at your archived or published forms. And by the way, your forms that are in draft mode, meaning you haven't put them anywhere yet, those will still be in this published form. This is basically, if I click on this, this is a list of all of the in process and open forms. And by the way, it's not uncommon for you as a school to have this many and to have a good 10, 20, 30 once you actually start using it more fully across different uses at your school. I will also say, although we're definitely not going to do any of this today, if you look at the average school, schools get more and more creative with this tool as they go through. You certainly won't find directions on how to use this for, say, I think maybe one of the most unusual cases I saw is some school was using it as a lunch sign-up form. It's not really built for that, but as you get comfortable, and I'm not necessarily recommending you use it to sign up for like ham sandwiches and stuff, but the point is, as you get more comfortable with event registration, you will find more and more use cases for it because it has a really useful feature set, and it's really easy to set up. It's really easy. Once you feel comfortable, you can set up an event registration in a few minutes. And last, before we start going in, I am going to point out that if you come back here in 3 weeks and you're like, oh, I want a quick guide on how to start from scratch again. I was in the meeting with Chaz, but it's been a few weeks. Use this quick start right here. This will actually take you through the basics of setting up a form, similar to what we did on Tuesday. All right, let's get into some of the more fun features. So I pointed out you can get to these here. Now I'd already opened it, so I didn't have to find it each time. I had opened up the event registration page for our golf tournament. And what I'm going to do first, the first feature we're going to spend a few minutes on is we are going to talk about the questions page. The questions page. So that's this middle dot here. When you go through, and if we go past here, it's this page. So it always shows up in the middle and allows you to create a form to collect information, which then you can either export or you can use in Veracross, the data that you've collected. Now, if you put a field here that's like, I'm just going to make up something, like if you put in something here like middle name, you can't hook it up to the middle name field and have it work as a way to fill CRM data fields. But it does allow you to query for the data points that you've collected. So even if you had t-shirt sizes, if you had the things you see here, if you had if it was like a field trip and you were asking them for transportation, or how are you going to get there? Are you going to take your own car? Do you need something else? You can do some of that here and have the data in Veracross in its own sort of like one use field to then pass along to whoever you need to, right? You might need to pass on a list to the cafeteria for box lunches. You might need to pass it along to the transportation team to say, hey, we, of the folks going, we got 30 people that said that they were going to need transportation from the school, that type of thing. It's not necessarily integrated with some of those other modules. It's just a single use. Hey, you have an event or events, you're collecting some data, and now we make it easy for you to use the data to support your event. So let's go through the steps of building one of these. I'm going to go back here, and there is a tab on the left called Questions. And you're going to use the input grid. This is what we call an input grid, where there are rows and there's an add record. You see these all over Axiom and in Veracross. And you're going to use the input grid to create your form. So you can already see what are the three things we have. We have a drop down to capture something called volunteering. We have a single line text for food allergies. And we even have an event specific option for tournament t-shirt size. If we look back here, we're actually only seeing twos. So we're seeing the volunteering question. We're seeing the food allergies. And you'll see that this event specific food allergies is tied to the golf luncheon, which we bought a ticket for. We on that first page, I said, I'm going to buy a ticket. And therefore, because the question is associated with that event, it asks me to fill it out on the question. And by the way, because I didn't sign up for the golf tournament, it's not showing the tournament t-shirt size. So just again, sort of breaking down what you're seeing here. So what if we want to add, I'm actually going to add the a t-shirt size again, but I'm gonna add it to our golf luncheon. Let's say everyone gets a t-shirt with the golf luncheon. So how do we do that? So first we click add, we're going to add a new row. We're going to tell it what the scope should be. So do we want it to be anyone who registers for anything? That's this entire registration. Do we want it to be specific to the event that they're signing up for? Or do we want it to be specific to the ticket type? Just kind of interesting, right? What that means is, think about it this way. If I go back to the beginning, what if there was a ticket type that came with some extra stuff, like a t-shirt, and it's like a higher price, but it's coming with a few things. You could tie that question about t-shirts to the ticket size, so you're only capturing that for folks who actually signed up for that special ticket that came with the t-shirt, that type of thing. So you're deciding on the scope. What we're going to do is we're going to tie it to the event. We're also going to determine whether it's required. I'm going to say it is required. And then we need to tell it what's the type, what is the field type that we need. So I'm going to go ahead and choose the same here, multi-choice checkboxes, which is kind of funny. Actually, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to do a single dropdown because you're getting one. You're not going to order, say, well, I want the small and the large or whatever. So I'm gonna do this differently. I'm gonna say it's gonna be a single choice drop down. And you always have to give it a label. Essentially, the label is going to be the name of the field, which is also important when we circle back around and I show you how to find your answers in your data, because it's going to ask you, well, what field or what label, and that's what the label is. So I'm going to call this luncheon t-shirt. Luncheon t-shirt. All right. And I'm going to come over here and I'm going to tie it to this same luncheon. I wonder if I can actually just do that, copy it. Yep, seems that worked. Copy that. I copied the other one, but essentially you could search for the event to tell it what event this will work with. And I'll hit update. I'm going to put this at the bottom, sort keys here. Now I'm not done. All I've done is tell it it's a question that's going to be asked for people who sign up for this event, and it's tied to this event. I didn't yet tell it what t-shirt sizes are we optioning. What are the options that we're having folks select from? So I'm going to go into the view record. And there's a few things here. We'll take a look at a couple others just so you get the full breadth here. But I'm going to focus in on what we would do for this one, which is we need the drop-down options. And any type of option selection, so the checkbox options, the drop-down selections, those all use this field, multi-choice options. And I'm going to go ahead and put in instructions so you see how that works. So I'm going to say, please select your t-shirt size. Instructions there. And then in the multi-choice, by the way, you can hover over this to know what the actual format is for the options. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to put, I think that's it. I don't bother to memorize it because I know I can just get it right here. 0 is going to be, and by the way, it's best practice to include a none specified or something like that. So I'm going to put none specified. S M L. All right, just keep it simple here. But the none specified, you'll see, I'll point out why you want to do this for any of these things that you're capturing. So I'm going to click update here. So now I have none specified. It's also the lowest, it's 0, lowest ID, and then I have 3 options. At this point, that's all I really have to do. Now I have this here. I'm going to go back and let's take a look. Now I'm going to need to refresh. Remember, I said that on Tuesday. If you've changed the configuration, you have to refresh. It will make you start at the beginning with your workflow, but it's essentially refreshing the configuration that I changed. So I'm going to say lunch for 3 here. Continue, register as a guest. All right. Here's our new field. Here's our new field. So under the ones that are under the questions that are event specific, you can see that the system adds a header for that. And so if you come down here, we can see the lunch and t-shirt. You can see we did make it required. And the reason I put none specified, this may stand out now, is that in a drop down, something is already selected. So if I didn't put none specified and I just said small, and I also made it required, the system gets trapped a bit, or put a different way. Nobody can select small because the way it knows it's required is they made a change, but the default was S. So S kind of means they didn't make a change. So anyway, hopefully that made sense. That's why you want to have something like none specified as a default whenever you're adding whenever we're adding a drop down. And really the only case where you might be okay with it is if it wasn't required and basically everyone was sort of opting in. Like you could think of like a yes, no, where it's like the top one is yes, and everyone sort of says yes to a question, but you're giving them the chance to opt out by saying no. Like that could be a case where you don't put none specified and the default is yes. Anyway, there might be some cases there, but generally you want to have the none specified option. Okay, let's go back. There's a couple other things I want to highlight about this question form before we move on to other features. All right. The other thing that you can do, and this is not going to be a training on the household profile update or policies, but you do have the ability. This makes a lot more sense if it's, say, for a field trip and you want to give families the ability to update their family information like they do in re-enrollment, like they do on the portal if you make it available there, but you want it to be part of the workflow that they can do. So you can do that too. If I add, I'm going to add a couple of things so you can get a sense for what that would generally look like. There are 2 things that you can weave in that I want to call attention to right now into your question form. One of those, I'm going to leave them as entire registrations to make it easy. One of those is going to be, I'm going to add the household profile update, and another one is going to be school policies. Again, these are 2 different features that are beyond what we're going to have time to talk about and break down today. But these features are at a high level. One, the household profile update allows families to update their information, contact data, emergency contacts, so on and so forth. School policies allows you to ask questions, and then it actually stores the data in a policy sort of section on each student. So that could be school policies, like I agree to the student handbook. A policy could be, I agree to a specific set of rules around a trip that we're about to take, right? That type of thing. And you build those in a different part of the system. But what this event registration form is letting you do is it's letting you plug that feature into their workflow, and specifically here into the questions page. So I'm gonna call this HPU and policies. You might call it update your family information or something, but for simplicity, I'm gonna do that. I actually should give it a sort key. So I'm going to give this one 50 and 60. If you do want to, for these, if you do want to, or not, if you want to, what you're going to need to do is you're going to need to, for the HPU, tell it which HPU form, because you might remember there are a few. different HPU forms. Most likely you're going to use the one that's, the family one for your parents. But maybe this event registration is actually going to staff faculty and you wanted to specifically tie in their HPU, right? The staff faculty HPU, because there's one of those. But in any case, to do that, you click into the question, and then in the upper right, you tell it which one. And it's going to list the ones that you have in your system, and you can choose the one you want to use. So maybe we use this one as the parent HPU. And then when you're going through it, it's going to have a link to the HPU. And then when they click on the link to the HPU, it's going to go to that particular HPU. Similarly, if you want to have policies, you need to assign it which policy form. You might remember, for those of you who know policies, you are essentially creating policy questions and then turning you have policy questions, and then you're turning those policy questions and bringing them together into a policy form. And so here, what you're doing is you're selecting the policy form that you want to be part of the question page. So I'm actually going to add that one here. There's a good question while I'm navigating. There's a good question here. Thank you, Jose, for asking that. If the family puts in a request, an address update in the HPU, there is a step where you have to you have to approve the address update, but then yes, to answer your question, once it's approved, it updates everyone in the system. So yes, the short answer there is yes, but you do have to be aware that specific to address do require approval. There's some good reasons behind that, but that goes beyond what we want to. We don't want to take a digression there right now. So let's look at it. Let's see what we've done. I'm going to refresh. Remember, we have to refresh. It's going to make us go to the beginning, but it doesn't take that long. So I'm going to come over here, select a ticket, say yes, register as a guest. So you can see we've now plugged in two additional fields here, and they both link off. So if I click this, it's going to open up the HPU, where then I could say, now, this one wouldn't make as much sense. And you might be guessing why, because the HPU there is to show records on file. And because I signed in as somebody who's not even in the system, it doesn't know whose data to show, right? There is no data. So the HPU would really be more useful in a case where you're requiring people to log in, therefore it knows who they are and it can show them their data. But generally, you can see this here where I'd be able to see, oh, what's my address? I need to change that. Oh, what's my personal contact information? I need to change that. Similarly, you can go to the policies here where it opens up a specific policy form. This is another case where it really needs to know who are you to know the policies. And again, this is a little bit more about policies than event registration, but that's because policies are person specific, and you also code them when you're creating the policies to apply to certain people. So you might have policies that only apply to, say, 9th graders versus 11th graders. And the policy form is smart enough to look at who it is and say, oh, okay, we're going to show the right policies to that person. When you're just using this as a community sign up, neither of these are going to know who they are, and they're not going to work. So this makes a lot more sense if you're requiring the person to sign up with their Veracross, which means it's a parent, it's a on behalf of a student, it's a staff, faculty, and so on. All right, so I showed HPU and policies here. The last thing we're going to do, the last thing I will tell where to. I'll go ahead and mention this now, that we do post these recordings in the same spot that you registered for them. So if you go back to the case, you click into it, you see the list, you'll be able to see this posted in its entirety within 1 to 2 days. So thank you for asking. All right, so now that we've done this, let's take a quick moment and see, where do the questions go? If they actually fill this out, they fill out the questions like food allergies or t-shirt size, where does the data go? So it goes into a couple places. So first of all, and I actually didn't check to see if this has any. Oh, good, it does. Just not a lot. I'll have to come back to that, Sherry. I'm not. Um, oh, okay. All right. Thank you. So, question responses. So as your families or whoever is actually filling out the event registration goes through the process, they fill out the questions, they submit. It does have to be submitted to Capture, so you don't have like in-process question data, which is good. You wouldn't want that. That'd be messy. It comes here. It comes to the question responses. And this is not a super helpful one. So I'm actually going to see, well, it takes, I will use it. So first of all, how do you read this page? And then I'm going to actually give you some tips for how do you get a more useful download of the answers. So what this question responses is, it's going to literally show you by the submission. That means there's going to be a header for every person who submitted. And then it's going to show the questions they filled out and what the responses were. So you can see here, and this was a test, obviously, because this says test, test, or T, T. So somebody put in a test submission where first and last name were literally just T. But whether it's a community member putting in their name, like I have been showing, or it's somebody logged in, so it knows who they are, it's going to show their name and it's going to show the things they filled out. But most likely what you're going to want to do is you're not going to be looking at I mean, you might, I guess, look at it per person, but more likely you're going to say, I just want to get all of the t-shirt sizes I need, or I need to download all of the specific allergy requirements, and then send that to the, I need to send that to the cafeteria. So how would I do that? There are two ways. If you need to, if your goal is actually to just get a download in Excel and then maybe you delete the questions you don't need, filter it down, and then you're just going to pop it in an email and send it, you can get that download question summary here. If I click this, it will actually open up Excel, and then I'll be able to save that, and then I can do with whatever I want. To me, that is kind of the best thing to do if your goal is with a question or two or three to get it, outside of Veracross, and provide that to, say, the lunch team or whoever's doing the t-shirts, and then you're just highlighting and deleting the questions you don't need. Maybe filtering, if Excel filtering is pretty easy, you copy everything or delete everything else, and then send it, right? Pretty straightforward. This here, question summary, downloads all the question information to Excel. But you can also, from the questions field, this is just a query. This is just, question responses. This is just a query. So what I would do is I would come over here. Let's say I want to get a list of t-shirt sizes. And again, this doesn't have a lot, but you're going to see the steps that I would do to isolate to the t-shirt sizes that we need. And then maybe I save that query or do whatever I want with the query and all the power of queries, right? You could even print it or whatever you want to do. So I'm going to click Open Query. Then I'm going to go to Design. I'm going to actually get rid of the subtotal. I don't really want the subtotal. I want to see the person name, but I don't need it to be subtotaled. The next thing I'm going to do is, this is where, remember I mentioned that the question label is essentially the name of the field. And this is the easiest way to filter. And by the way, you may not have noticed, but I actually just did a Control C, like I copied this value because I didn't want to have to remember, so that when I come back to my query, my query here, I just put it there, tournament t-shirt size. I probably can get rid of some of these other things, like I don't need to know ticket detail right here because this is t-shirt size. It has nothing to do with tickets. I'm going to go ahead and get rid of submission ticket, and then I'm going to run the query again. And what you could imagine is I have now just filtered this down to only questions with women's tournament t-shirt size. It is still filtered to this question. I'm not going to go down this, but I will mention it for some of you who may be a little bit further along in your Axiom usage. But you could envision if you were having folks sign up for a bunch of events and there were t-shirts across events, you could even come back here and filter to more than just a single event, right? This one's actually registration form, but if I wanted to filter by something else that was cutting across events and questions being captured, I could do that too. So again, you can get pretty powerful here. But what I'm saying for this one is all I'm doing is I want to filter it to the tournament t-shirt size data for this particular registration, which is there by default. And then that's all I'm going to get. And then my response, would be, let's say that we had 150 people fill this out. We might sort by response and we can see, oh, there's, 29 women's small, 36 men's medium, whatever it happens to be. And you see that right here. And then, of course, you can use Axiom to save your query to workspace. And then you can have your, golf tournament t-shirt size query. Maybe you're passing that along to somebody because they're going to do something with it. So those are really the two ways to get at this, two ways to get at the detail. You either go to the submissions tab and you download it all as one sort of thing in Excel, all of the questions, or you use the question response tab to pop this out into a query and create whatever report in Veracross you want based on one or more of the questions that you need the data for. So again, this is very powerful. This is very powerful. The last thing I will mention about how this works, and then I promise we'll move on to other things, is that I do get the question. I do see the question sometimes around what if we wanted to, let's go back. I'll give an example. Hey, we have a golf luncheon and we're allowing people to do a lunch for 1, 2, or 3. The sign up, though, is only going to be for the person doing the sign up. So we're really only capturing that person. How do we capture the extra person 2 and person 3 if they get this lunch for 3? So by the way, I do not remember exactly where this is on our roadmap, although I know it is on our roadmap to actually make this more a built-in feature to capture additional participants for an event. But what the best practice is to do right now is to use the form and the data. So if I say lunch for 3, what you could do with that lunch page or the questions page is you could actually tie it to create fields for that golf luncheon where it says like person 2 name, person 2 email, and then person 3 name, person 3 email. And like by doing that, you're capturing that data. Now you're right that, and this is the feedback that I often get, well, that doesn't it doesn't put them into the attendance like section of the it does indicate that this person bought 3 tickets, so you expect there to be 3 people, but it doesn't tell you here are the 3 people in the attendance list. And that's what the purpose of building this out as a more robust feature would be. But again, if your goal is, I just need to know who they are because I'm going to need to pass that to the people who are managing the event, you can capture that here on the event and just put person 2, person 3. If you really wanted to be tricky about it, you could even put person 2 and person 3 in our questions here. You could tie it to the tickets of 2 and 3 so that your person 3 only showed up in that 3rd ticket, and then you could be required to make sure that they fill that out. So again, schools work around it, not yet having that feature of sort of built into when you select multiple tickets, like, well, who are the other people using the tickets? But you can do that, and that is the best practice currently for using questions to capture that information. All right, we're going to talk about 2 or 3 different advanced ticket types and ticket uses uh, that I want you to know about. And so we're going to go back to our front page here because I'm going to want us to look at them as we build them. And get rid of this. Come here. We're going to go back to general. We're going to go into our golf luncheon multi-ticket scenario. So the first thing that I want to show you, is that you can choose to have a discount code type of ticket. A discount code type of ticket. That could be a staff and faculty special price. It could be any number of things. And this is the way that works. So if I come in here, add record, this is going to be a discount. I'm going to call this staff faculty. And it's going to be lunch for 2. And instead of 60, it's going to be 45. I also need to put in a discount code to make this work. I am also going to put this at the bottom. Make that 40, 45. The discount code is just going to be called staff. Very simple. So now I've added a discount code. The discount code is staff. And if you put in that discount code, you then have the ability to buy the $45 lunch for 2. Let's see how that works. So I'm going to refresh. Now there's a new option here that says discount code right under here. And if I click on this, it's going to ask me, well, what's the code? If I put in staff, apply code. Now I have this staff faculty lunch for 2, $45. Oops. Had 1 and it's 45. So you can have that discount code. Then there might be maybe there's some events that you have where people on financial aid are given a specific code. They have a specific price. And you could provide that specific price and give them the code for folks on financial aid. Anyway, they're, up to you how you want to use it, but it's pretty straightforward. It is added as a ticket type with a discount code, with a price, and then it becomes this little section, down here. Technically speaking, you could have multiple tickets with a discount code. And so you could have one for financial aid families, you could have one for staff and faculty, and those different people could put in their code and see their ticket price. And you just need to make sure it gets added in your list of ticket types. Here's the next scenario. So that's discount code. The next scenario is I want to cover, this is less of a feature and more of a best practice to a question that I see a lot for schools using this. So the question goes, I have early bird pricing to incent folks to sign up in April instead of May. How do I manage that early bird pricing in the context of this module? So here's what you do. I'm going to add an early bird lunch for 1 price ticket. It's going to be a normal ticket type. It's going to be lunch for 1. Call it early bird pricing. It's going to be 25 instead of 30. I'm even going to give it the same sort key. Now, there's no magic here. So often what I get asked along with this question is, hey, can I just is there a place I can plug in a date and time and they sort of swap in and out at that date and time? Simple answer is no. But what you can do is, and this is what schools do, is they use this status flag to disable the standard lunch for 1 ticket. And then on the day that the early bird pricing needs to go away, they flip it, right? So let's look at that, right? So right now, if I go back to my form, sorry, Go back to my form, I refresh. I see that right now I'm seeing early bird pricing, lunch for one, 25. Let's say that, this expired yesterday. So I wake up, in the morning, I just go and I enable the standard price, disable the early bird price, update, and the very next person who actually loads this now sees the standard price. So that's what I see done a lot for, could be early bird pricing. It could be a pricing penalty if it's late. I've seen a bunch of different things, but essentially the idea there is there may be events that you have where the pricing changes over time. And this is how you do that. You just add a different type of ticket. Now, you could also do something like, but I'm going to give you a reason not to do this because I see this and it can work, but you have to be careful. Why would you not just go in on your lunch for one and just update the ticket type? Well, here's the reason. That is fine as long as you are doing online only purchasing. But if you are going to be collecting money at the door, it is going to tell you, hey, this person didn't pay, but it's not going to remember the exact number at point of time to tell you what they owe because you are changing that over time. And so again, that could work if they're paying only in real time, because then it's always the price they should pay online. But the minute you are going to be taking payment elsewhere and you're changing the amount on the ticket itself over time, you're going to potentially make a mistake and charge somebody the right amount or think that they owe the wrong amount, that type of thing. All right, next feature. All right, so we talked about discount code. We talked about how to manage sort of different types of tickets. Now what we're going to do is we're going to talk about the donation ticket, And it's really, this is how you enable the taking of a donation as part of your event registration sign up. You actually can kind of see what's going on down here. And we're going to add a few other, we're going to add two others. Now, the thing that's helpful to remember is in terms of the workflow that parents see, they really don't know, like, it just says, would you like to make a donation at the end? It does not matter what the event type is that you're putting this on. And I only say that because if you had, like we do here, if we have multiple events, here, you may ask, well, which do I add it to? The answer, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. I have a partial preference that if one of them was more of an actual development event than the other, put it on the development event because it will tag it with that event. Because you're putting it on that event, but that's less about the parent workflow and more about the data as it comes in. But if you come here, view record, you add the donation right here in this input grid. So I'm going to add a couple. I'm going to call this all donation. Donation type. Here's the thing. So if you leave one of these 0, that is going to be a write-in. That is going to be a write-in for the family, which I want, because I want you to see that. I'm going to actually change this. I'm going to make the write-in 100. And this one, I'm going to put $50. I'm going to make this one 200. And this I'm going to make 300. The sort key matters because they're going to see a list of their options, and you want it to be a logical order. If we had 1,000, 1,500 at the top, that might seem a bit aggressive. Or if we had the write-in in the middle, that might just seem weird. So helpful to see, okay, I want the write-in to be first, and then we have a couple options, whatever you make those options out to be. Let's go see how that looks. So I'm going to have to walk through, so bear with me. Doesn't take very long. Here, yes, yes, yes. Oh, did I not refresh this? I may not have refreshed it. Give me a second. Okay. So now you can see what we're doing here. So you can see that by default, it's on 0. Then I have the option to write in. So I could say, well, I'm just going to do $10. Or I could come over here and select one of the presets. So you could have a single option. You could have, I don't know, never seen somebody have like 8, but you can choose to do this how you want to. You could choose to only have presets and no open. And the open, really, just a reminder, an open is just you leave it as 0 when you're adding the donation. And if you were adding the donation, you might even take on this summary page. Remember how you can on over here, you could come to the instructions, and on the summary page, it must be this confirmation instructions is a summary, right? So you could add something here like, please consider donating to our something, such and such a fund, blah, blah, blah. Like you could make a small appeal that would show up right here above this section, right? So you can sort of tie it in so that they understand what they're donating to and why, they're buying tickets and they're being asked for a donation. So just a recommendation there. Use the instructions we learned about on Tuesday for that. The only other thing I'll say about donations is that if you do have Veracross development and online giving, I have also seen schools, because online giving allows you to do recurring donations. I have seen schools, in fact, you can actually see it here, where schools will put a direct link to their development, their Veracross development online giving form, which has even more, it's a more robust donation platform. So it's kind of up to you. Do you want to just a simple, hey, do you want to donate $25? Or do you want the full donation platform where they can decide if it's recurring or one time and what fund? Do they have any notes and sort of about the donation, all those things that they might want to put in there? Point that out that is possible there. Okay. We're closing in on the end. And so what I have here, what I want to do is I want to call out 2 last features. We're not going to do a full walkthrough of both of these features. They have more narrow sets, and one of them I'm just going to mention. The other one I will at least point a few things out. So what is this whole deal with consolidated events? Consolidated events. This is most often used, I've seen, in a case, I've seen this most often used in admissions for open houses. But let me tell you what it is. Basically, it's a way of saying, I want the person signing up to sign up for one of a series of events that are exactly the same. Like the events are exactly the same. Let's say we had 9 open houses, one every 3 weeks or something like that over the course of the fall and into the spring or whatever it is. And we don't need them to see a page that breaks out every single one because they're all the same. The only thing that is different is the date and time. That is a use case for the consolidated event. And what that will do, so let me show you again. I'm not going to do all the steps, but I'm going to point out what you need to do. First of all, you would still add all 9 open houses the way we've talked about here. You would need all 9 of them listed and associated with the registration form. But then when you add them, the action type is it's going to be a consolidated here. So that's the action type. And then instead of, when you do that, when you actually call the events a consolidated type, then what you're going to see is that over here in the upper right, what you're going to see is that it's going to use these fields to determine what actually shows as the header and the stuff up here, the details. And so you might say the override is just admission open house. Maybe there's a contact email. Please attend our open house. And that's just an easy way of basically saying, regardless of what you happen to put as the name on the different 9 events here, or maybe some of them had a contact email, some didn't. Like, it's just forcing a consistency. And then essentially what it is, or how again, I'm not going to fully do it, but you would essentially have a drop down of dates and times. So it's one thing that says admission open house, whatever information. It doesn't show the date and time on the heading. It shows the date and times as options on a drop down to select. So that's one feature I want you to know about. One feature to know about here. Second, the last feature for us today. The last feature is that I'm going to mention is this var cross parent student. The way this works is that this is always going to require a parent to log in, and their signups are going to be based on their kids. So I know we've been talking about a golf tournament, but let me sort of pivot our mind for a second on a different scenario. What if what you need to do is you need to get everyone in the high school to sign up for some trip they go on? It's a weekend trip, and you want the parent to sign up for the trip. And maybe there's a few options, right? Maybe there are a few options. You need to ask different questions because some of them are maybe longer distance than the others, whatever. All the things we just talked about that you can have with prices and everything else. But again, the idea is I need a parent to sign up for one or more of their students for those events. So first of all, you set it this way, set it parent student, which is going to mean that it expects a parent to sign up. And by the way, this is the only use case where if it's set this way, your first page is a sign up page before it even gets to the events. Why? Because it needs to know first who are the students of the parent who's logging in so that I know which events to actually display as possible for sign up. Everything else, there's one more thing I'm going to point out. Most everything else is the same as well, because you're going to need to have all of the events. In a case, I saw one school doing trip sign up. They had like 50 here or something like that. Because every person in the upper school or something like that chose to go on one trip off campus or whatever it is. And so you still need all the events here, prices, dates, like all that stuff is still the same. But I mentioned a second ago that, well, what if you need to filter the events to specific kids? Because maybe the 9th grade goes on, certain events apply to them. 10th grade events apply to them. You will need to, for this event type, you will need to make sure that on the event, you are pre-populating an attendance record, an event attendance record for the people it applies to. So how do you do that? So think back to Thursday. We're going to come into one of these and we're going to tell it to have a primary group. And I could just say the primary group is kids in grade 9. Well, that's actually students and teachers, but I'll use it. There's another one that's just students in grade 9. We select it. And then we go over to the event attendance and we say, yes, we turn it on and we say, yes, default to invited. The interaction there is if you have one or more groups on an event and then you tell it to track attendance, it's going to look at who's in the groups and it's going to put an attendance record for each of those kids. And that is how the event registration, when the parent logs in, and it looks, maybe they have 1 kid, maybe they have 3 kids, like depending on the sign up that you're doing, it's going to look at the events that you've hooked up and say, okay, I'm looking for an attendance, like basically an invited attendance. for that kid. And then I'm going to put that option there for the parent to see if the kid is on that list, if the student is on that list. So I've seen that used for trips. I've seen it used for signing students up for off-campus exams. I've seen it used for actually signing folks up for sort of temporary responsibilities, like some volunteer stuff where they want to capture, like every kid has to choose like a volunteer thing at school. And you create the events, you put the right kids on the event, and you use that event type. I guess I left it here. You use this parent student event type, and then you sign up. By the way, last thing, and I know we're almost out of time, going a little bit longer than I thought I would need to, but if you use the Veracross user only, you can use the same type of interaction where you can pre-populate the event attendance on the event, and it will filter to the ones that the person who logged in and says, oh, these 3 apply to you, these 2 don't. And the reason I call that out is you may want to use this outside of just having a parent signing up for specific events for their students. You might want to send an event registration to a set of adults who have a user account, staff, faculty, parents themselves, and you may want it to pre-filter the events only to the ones that you've put the folks on, the people you want to sign up. And you do that by on the event that goes on the event, you need to make sure that you've selected the people on the attendance tab, and then you're using one of these 2 options that requires login. It cannot do it on one that doesn't require login. And the login ones are Veracross parent student and Veracross user only. So I know we have one last minute. And so please, I really appreciate everyone's attendance. If you need to hop off, you certainly can. I will stick around for a couple minutes to answer questions. And like Jose asked earlier, we will be posting this on the sign up page so that you can get back to it if you need to. So thank you. And I will pivot now to any questions that we want to come in here. So if we have a trip that costs $1,000 and we want parents to make 2 payments, would this trip be set up in events? So there's really 2 options there. I think the Veracross approved way to do that is that if you really want folks to be able to do payment plans, you would need to essentially use a pay later, sort of like you would essentially say payment is not enabled. You would still have prices on them, and you would use the Veracross student billing to move the charges over there, and you would essentially ask folks either on the questions page or otherwise, do you need a payment plan, and we'll split it up. I see what you're saying about could you sort of hack it by getting them into 2 different events and like having a $500 and a $500 event. I guess so. Like, I guess you could do that. The thing you have to realize, like, it's certainly that's not how Veracross was designed. And then you just have to manage the fact that you have people separated across 2 different events. And still, even as I'm trying to think through that, like, I don't know how you stop the parent from paying in real time for that. So it's a little messy. I think the way to do it would be capture, if you really need a payment plan, capture that in some way, and then use Veracross student billing to move that need and the amount billed to a follow-up. But thanks for that question. Where do the payments show up in accounting? Can you use this to collect a deposit? So this particular does not collect a deposit. Now, nothing stops you from saying, hey, the price of this luncheon being paid on the ticket is a deposit, and we are going to bill you via the student billing module for the remainder. But you have to be very careful, because I could see a parent getting confused. And saying, but you said it was only 100. You'd have to be very clear somewhere that the numbers below are actually a deposit. We will be charging you the other, 50% or whatever via your incidental invoice or something like that. Otherwise, like I mentioned in Jose's case, I think if you're doing more complicated payment like that, it's much more likely just capture the participation And then you'll have the data, and then you can use the Veracross student billing module with the charge import to just import what you want to put on folks' invoices. So it's not directly integrated. I do want to make a comment, Andrea, about to what you said. There is a tab here called accounting info. This is really just about putting GL details on specific payments so that if you're using Veracross accounting, they can process the payments the way they want to. Again, this is not an integration point with student billing. It's just making sure you're tracking the cash the right way on the accounting side. Good question. I think there might be any way to remove Veracross privacy policy from registration form or brand with our own. There are some places I'm trying to remember where that would actually be. Maybe you're talking about this. Veracross does have privacy policies that it has to maintain. I'm actually not the right person to be able to give a full sort of convincing reason on why that is, although I know that we wouldn't have put this there if there wasn't some reason we had to. And I thinking back, I know I've heard our InfoSec team say before in the context of payments why we have to have a privacy policy that's Veracross. So unfortunately, the answer is no. You can't remove in places of Veracross where there are privacy policies listed. Those have to be listed. All right, I'll see if there's any last questions. I would say for anything else about like consent, like different policies, that's what you want to either do using the questions that we talked about, like having a policy form, and you can put whatever policies, consent policies, consent to consent to travel, all of those things. You can have that either on a policy form, or I actually see schools capture them as detail, and they might even have a link that says like, please type your name in to indicate your assent. Consent policy. You're not talking about this? Sorry, Sherry, do you want to come off mute for 1 second?
The screen that you were just on, the event registration build form, previous to this, left-hand corner, consent policy. Under all the way down. If I go anywhere to try to add one, for example, on my system homepage and utilize this, I get a big red error, and I didn't know what this was for. I know how to make school policies.
Yeah,
I think
I
that this is a
actually
neat feature.
I'm not sure. I don't know if this I don't know. That's a good question. That's a good question. Sherry, I'm happy to follow up with you in our case.
Okay, thank you.
My guess is, I mean, since yeah, that may be something that's deprecated, maybe from COVID. I don't know. But I'm happy to follow up.
Appreciate. Thank you so much for everything.
Yep. All right. Thanks everyone for your time, and have a good day.